The first thing people noticed was not the woman.
Look at her.
It was the little girl standing beside her, clutching a faded wooden music box against her chest as though it were worth more than the suitcase at her feet. Then someone whispered, "That's her." Another voice answered quietly, "The widow from Millbrook." By the time Emily Harper reached the center of Ashwood, every pair of eyes seemed to know her name. None of them knew the truth. The stagecoach rolled away, leaving dust hanging in the cool mountain air. Emily stood still for a moment, holding her daughter's hand while studying the unfamiliar town. The streets were lined with small brick buildings, a bakery, a blacksmith, a tailor, and a general store where customers had already stopped talking to watch her. Lily tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mama, are we home now?" Emily forced a small smile. "I hope so." It wasn't much of an answer, but it was the only honest one she had. 3 weeks earlier she had buried her husband after a logging accident. The company had refused responsibility, claiming he ignored safety rules. His wages stopped immediately, their rented house was sold, and the debts he never spoke about became hers overnight. She had only enough money for a train ticket, a stagecoach ride, and 2 nights at a roadside inn. Ashwood was supposed to be their fresh start. Instead, it felt like another place waiting to reject them. Emily walked toward the boarding house carrying one suitcase while Lily struggled with the music box. The owner, Mrs. Collins, looked at them through the screen door before opening it. "You looking for a room?" "Yes, ma'am." "For how long?" "I'm hoping to find work." Mrs. Collins studied her face. "You the Harper widow?" Emily nodded. "I am." The woman's expression changed almost instantly. "I heard your husband owed money in Millbrook." "He did. And folks said there were problems. There were rumors." Mrs. Collins folded her arms. "I'm sorry, but I don't rent rooms to people who bring trouble." Emily didn't argue. Experience had taught her that defending herself only made strangers believe gossip more strongly. She simply thanked the woman, turned around, and walked back toward the street. Lily looked up. "Did we do something wrong?" Emily squeezed her daughter's hand. "No." "Then why didn't she like us?" Emily looked away before answering. Sometimes people decide who you are before they meet you. The afternoon passed with one disappointment after another. The bakery needed no help. The hotel had already hired someone. The dressmaker apologized but couldn't afford another assistant. By sunset, Emily had visited every business on Main Street. No one offered work. Most barely looked at her. The last place remaining was a woodworking shop near the edge of town. Unlike the others, its windows were open. The steady rhythm of a hammer echoed into the street. Emily hesitated. "This is the last one," she whispered. Inside, the smell of fresh pine filled the air. Shelves, rocking chairs, cabinets, tables, and unfinished furniture stood neatly arranged around the workshop. A tall man in a rolled-up shirt worked quietly at a wooden dining table, carefully sanding one corner. He didn't notice her immediately. Emily cleared her throat. "Excuse me." The man looked up. His brown hair was dusted with sawdust, and his hands were rough from years of work. "Can I help you?" "My name is Emily Harper." He waited patiently. "I'm looking for work." He looked at her suitcase, then at Lily. "What kind of work?" "I can cook." He nodded. "I can clean." Another nod. "I can sew." "What about carpentry?" She smiled for the first time that day. "I'm afraid I'd ruin more wood than I'd save." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Honest answer." Emily lowered her eyes. "It's the only kind I know." The man wiped his hands with an old cloth. "My name's Daniel Carter." Lily peeked around her mother. "You made all these?" Daniel smiled at the little girl. "Most of them. They're beautiful." "Thank you." Emily interrupted gently. "I understand if you don't need anyone." Daniel looked around the workshop. "I don't need another carpenter." Emily nodded, preparing to leave. "But," he continued, "I do need someone who can keep this place clean. Customers notice dust before they notice craftsmanship." Emily looked surprised. "You'd hire me?" "If you're willing to work." "I am. The pay isn't much. I'll earn every dollar." "When can you start?" Emily blinked. "Tomorrow." Daniel shook his head. You've probably not eaten. Emily remained silent. Daniel reached into his pocket, removed a small key and handed it to her. The apartment above the workshop is empty. She stared at the key. I can't afford rent. I'm not asking for rent. I don't want charity. It isn't. What is it? You'll clean the upstairs too. Emily looked at him carefully. People who lied usually spoke too quickly. Daniel didn't. He simply waited. Finally she accepted the key. Thank you. You're welcome. Lily smiled wider than she had in weeks. That evening the apartment felt warmer than any place they had stayed since leaving Millbrook. It wasn't large. A small kitchen. One bedroom. An old iron stove. A cracked window overlooking the workshop. But it was clean. Safe. For the first time in weeks, Lily slept peacefully. Emily remained awake beside the window. She wondered why a complete stranger had trusted someone the rest of the town wouldn't even hire. The next morning Emily arrived downstairs before sunrise. Daniel was already lighting the stove. You rise early. I always have. He handed her a cup of coffee. She accepted it. Thank you. You don't have to thank me every 5 minutes. Emily looked embarrassed. I've forgotten what kindness feels like. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead he opened the workshop doors. Morning sunlight poured across the wooden floor. Customers began arriving before 8. Emily swept the floors, organized tools, polished finished furniture, and greeted every visitor with quiet respect. Some customers ignored her completely. Others recognized her. One man leaned toward Daniel. You know who she is? I do. You sure that's wise? Daniel continued measuring a chair leg. I hired a worker. I heard she's trouble. Daniel finally looked at him. I've only seen hard work. The customer had nothing more to say. Emily heard every word. She pretended not to. Days slowly became weeks. Every morning Daniel unlocked the shop before sunrise. Every morning Emily already had coffee waiting. Neither spoke much. Neither needed to. Their routines fit together naturally. Lily spent afternoons doing homework at a small workbench Daniel built just for her. She watched him carve tiny wooden birds from leftover scraps. One afternoon he handed her one. For you. She turned it over carefully. Did you really make this? I did. It's prettier than toys from the store. Daniel laughed softly. Don't tell the toy makers. Emily watched from across the room. It had been months since she heard Lily laugh that freely. One rainy afternoon Emily unpacked the old music box Lily had carried across 3 towns. She placed it carefully on a shelf while dusting. Daniel noticed it. May I? She nodded. He turned the tiny handle. Nothing happened. It hasn't worked since before my husband died. Daniel opened the back panel. Several gears were broken. The spring had snapped. It'll take time. It isn't worth repairing. He looked at her. If someone carried it this far. His eyes shifted toward Lily. I'd say it's worth something. Emily said quietly. It was the last thing my husband carved for her. Daniel closed the music box gently. I'll see what I can do. 3 evenings later Lily heard music drifting through the apartment. She ran downstairs. The little wooden box sat on Daniel's workbench. The melody was soft, gentle. Exactly as she remembered. Lily's eyes filled with tears. It sings again. Daniel smiled. It just needed someone patient enough to listen. Emily couldn't speak. She simply placed one hand over the music box before whispering, Thank you. Daniel returned to sanding a chair as though repairing treasured memories was simply another day's work. Outside, however, someone standing across the street had witnessed everything. By the next morning, the whispers around Ashwood had started again. Only this time they weren't questioning Emily's past. They were questioning why Daniel Carter seemed unwilling to let the widow face it alone. The rumor spread through Ashwood faster than the spring rain. It started with a single sentence. Daniel Carter has fallen for the widow. By the end of the week, everyone had their own version of the story. Some claimed Emily planned it from the beginning. Others insisted Daniel had become too lonely to think clearly. Neither story was true. The truth was much quieter. Every morning, Emily unlocked the workshop before sunrise. Every evening, Daniel made sure the fire in the apartment stove stayed lit before going home to his small cabin behind the lumber yard. They shared meals only when work kept them late. They rarely spoke about the past. Yet somehow each day became easier simply because the other was there. That frightened Emily more than the gossip ever could. She had promised herself after losing her husband that she would never depend on anyone again. Depending on people meant risking everything when they disappeared. She refused to let Lily experience that kind of loss twice. One Saturday afternoon the workshop was unusually busy. A wealthy farmer ordered a new dining table. A young couple purchased a rocking chair. Just before closing, an older woman stepped inside. Mrs. Dawson. She looked around before lowering her voice. Daniel. He looked up from his work. I've known you since you were a boy. I know. You've earned this town's respect. I hope so. She glanced toward Emily, who was arranging finished shelves. People are saying you're throwing it away. Daniel calmly brushed the sawdust from his apron. By hiring the best worker I've had? Mrs. Dawson sighed. You know that isn't what they mean. Daniel answered without raising his voice. I don't build my life with other people's opinions. The woman shook her head. You'll regret this. After she left, silence settled over the workshop. Emily pretended to continue working, but her hands no longer moved. Daniel noticed. You don't have to listen to them. She smiled weakly. I've been listening my whole life. That evening Lily sat at the workbench coloring a picture of a little wooden house with flowers outside. Daniel walked over. Whose house is that? Our future house. Oh. She nodded confidently. It has Mama. He smiled. Good. It has me. Even better. She hesitated. It has you too. Daniel looked surprised. Does it? Lily nodded. You always fix broken things. She looked toward Emily. You fixed Mama's smile. Emily froze. Daniel had no words. Children often spoke truths adults spent years trying to hide. The following morning Emily made a decision. Before Daniel arrived, she wrote a short letter. Thank you for giving us hope. But hope should never cost you your good name. Lily and I will leave before sunrise. Please don't look for us. Emily folded the note carefully and placed it beneath the repaired music box. She packed only what they had brought to Ashwood. One suitcase, one blanket, one music box. Nothing more. Long before dawn, she woke Lily. The little girl rubbed her eyes. Where are we going? A different town. But I like it here. Emily kissed her forehead. So do I. Then why are we leaving? Emily struggled to answer. Because sometimes leaving hurts less than staying. Lily looked toward the workshop downstairs. What about Mr. Daniel? Emily remained silent. That silence told Lily everything. An hour later they reached the train station. The platform was nearly empty. Only a few travelers waited beside the tracks. Emily bought 2 tickets with almost all the money she had saved. The train would arrive in 15 minutes. She stared at the rails, trying to convince herself she was doing the right thing. Then she heard footsteps running across the wooden platform. Emily. She turned. Daniel stood several yards away, breathing heavily. His shirt was covered with sawdust. He had clearly come straight from the workshop. Lily smiled. I knew he'd come. Emily looked surprised. You knew? I forgot my drawing. Daniel finally reached them. He wasn't carrying flowers. He wasn't holding a ring. Only Emily's folded letter. I found this. She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. For what? For making your life harder. Daniel looked genuinely confused. You've done the opposite. The town? The town doesn't wake up beside me every morning. She stared at him. The town doesn't keep the workshop running. He took another step. The town didn't make that place feel like home. Emily's voice trembled. They'll keep talking. They probably will. You could lose customers. I can build more furniture. You could lose your reputation. Daniel smiled softly. A reputation built on fear isn't worth keeping. For several long seconds neither of them spoke. Finally Emily whispered, I don't know how to trust again. Daniel nodded. I know. You do. I lost my parents before I turned 20. Emily looked surprised. I stopped depending on people too. He looked toward Lily. Then one little girl asked if I'd build her a treehouse. Lily raised her hand proudly. I still want one. Daniel laughed. I already bought the wood. Emily couldn't help smiling. You did. 3 days ago. She covered her face for a moment. You really believed we'd stay? I hoped. And if I said no? Daniel answered without hesitation. I'd help you carry your suitcase onto the train. Emily looked at him. You wouldn't try to stop me? No. Why? Because love that has to trap someone isn't love. The station became completely silent. Even the station master looked away, pretending not to watch. Lily gently slipped her small hand into Emily's. Mama. Emily looked down. I think we're already home. Tears filled Emily's eyes. Not because Daniel had promised her an easy life. Not because the gossip would suddenly disappear. But because, for the first time since losing her husband, someone had offered her a choice instead of pressure. She slowly handed both train tickets back to the station clerk. "We won't be needing these." Lily laughed and hugged Daniel tightly. He looked startled before carefully hugging her back. "I guess I should start building that treehouse. You promised." "I remember." The months that followed were anything but perfect. Some customers refused to enter the workshop. Others quietly returned after seeing the quality of Daniel's work had never changed. Emily introduced new ideas. She suggested handcrafted toy boxes, rocking horses, bookshelves, and custom cabinets. Sales slowly increased. People began recommending the workshop because of its craftsmanship rather than gossip. One afternoon, a young couple drove nearly 40 miles just to order furniture after hearing about Daniel's honesty. Word spread for a different reason this time. The carpenter who stood by his worker. The widow who never asked for pity. The little girl whose laughter filled the workshop every afternoon. Summer arrived. The treehouse overlooked a small creek behind the workshop. Daniel spent nearly every evening adding something new. A rope ladder. A tiny porch. Flower boxes beneath the windows. Lily proudly called it the tallest castle in Ashwood. Emily often watched them from below. She realized something. Daniel never tried to replace Lily's father. He simply became another person she could rely on. That mattered more. One autumn evening, after the workshop had closed, Daniel carried a simple wooden chair into the center of the room. Unlike every other chair he had built, this one had tiny wildflowers carved along its back. Emily ran her fingers across the carvings. "You made this." "I did." "For sale?" He smiled. "No." She looked at him curiously. "It's yours." "Why?" "Because every home deserves a chair no one else owns." Emily laughed softly. "You always speak like a carpenter. I only know how to build things." He reached into his pocket. Not for a ring, but for a small wooden key he had carved by hand. She looked confused. "It doesn't open anything." "Not yet." He took a slow breath. "If someday you want a house that belongs to all three of us." He placed the tiny key in her palm. "I'll spend the rest of my life building it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She closed her fingers around the little wooden key. Then, without saying a single word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't dramatic. There was no applause. No audience. Only the quiet workshop where two lonely people had slowly built something stronger than fear. Outside, the evening breeze carried the scent of fresh pine through the open doorway. Inside, Lily looked up from her coloring book and smiled. She had known long before either of them. Some things didn't need to be said. They only needed time to be built.